Good day, everyone, and thank you for availing yourself to attend TEDxUTM. Now, ladies and gentlemen, before I begin my TED Talk today, allow me to ask all of you to do a simple exercise. Would you all close your eyes momentarily, please? Now, imagine a day in your life, or your lifestyle even, before the pandemic. The freedom that you got, not having to wear a face mask, not having to check in, not having to worry about crowded places, not having to quarantine, so on and so forth. That was good, right? Now, ladies and gentlemen, let's open our eyes back to our reality. Now, the pandemic has brought both good and bad. Our lives have been changed since the Malaysian federal government announced a national lockdown on the 18th of March 2020. And since that decision, a lot of ramifications has happened to Malaysians. Some, unfortunately, for even the worse. Social problems were on the rise since the government imposed the lockdown. Things like cost of living, unemployment rates, mental health illnesses, financial literacy, and the social problems, and the list just goes on and on. Now, allow me to make an assumption, ladies and gentlemen, that all of you know at least one person who has suffered from these social problems in one way or another. Allow me to tell you a story, ladies and gentlemen, as I knew personally someone who suffered from mental health illnesses so severe and drastically during the pandemic that this individual unfortunately took their own life during the pandemic. Now, this was eye-opening to me, as it made me realize how severe and drastic the social problems are, as we have never faced a pandemic before. Allow me to pose a question to you, ladies and gentlemen. Can there be partnership between a federal government like the Malaysian federal government and affiliations like NGOs and CSOs to work together to combat these social problems? Because let's face it, the social problems are here and they're going to get worse over time. So we have to deal with it and strike while the iron is hot. And to answer your question, it can be dealt with, ladies and gentlemen. Federal governments and NGOs, CSOs, can work together in unison to solve and address social problems and issues. How, you might ask? Well, ladies and gentlemen, there is a way: through an agreement. Now, not just any agreement, but a specific agreement called a Relationship Framework Agreement. Well, what is that? What does it entail? Simply put, a Relationship Framework Agreement is a bilateral agreement between a federal government and multiple legally registered CSOs or NGOs that are advocating for a certain cause or impact to address social pain points or issues. For example, mental health illnesses. This is different, as the Malaysian federal government in the past has signed Memorandums of Understandings, MOU, with various NGOs and CSOs in Malaysia, which has come to no avail. These MOUs don't highlight the efficiency, the responsiveness, the policy journey, and most importantly, the delivery of public service. This is how the Relationship Framework Agreement is more equipped as compared to the Memorandum of Understanding, or MOUs. An agreement in partnership between a federal government, like the Malaysian federal government, and multiple legally registered NGOs or CSOs advocating for a common cause. Amidst the pandemic, from what I have researched and been a part of firsthand when I got my boots to the ground, was that the federal government has the resources, but they lack the manpower to execute said policies and plans that they have laid out. Well, this would make sense. They have a land to govern, especially amidst difficult times. Now, NGOs and CSOs, on the other hand, however, they have the manpower, they have the expertise, the drive, and the work ethic. But what they lack is the resources. Are we seeing a pattern here, ladies and gentlemen? Now, let us bring these two parties together through a relationship framework agreement that clearly states the role that both federal governments and NGOs or CSOs have to play to address and combat social pains and issues in Malaysia. Unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, recently in our beloved nation, Malaysia, a lot of political instability has been occurring. And this has actually impacted how the federal government addresses social pain points and issues. Some of them are being dealt with. We will give the federal government credit, but they're not being dealt with perhaps in the best of ways. There has to be more bipartisan support, and this can actually happen through a relationship framework agreement. The federal government has indeed worked together with CSOs and NGOs in the past, and it has been successful. A good case example would be Undi 18, which was a CSO that actually advocated to lower the voting age in Malaysia from 21 years of age to 18 years of age. This was an organization led by the youth for the youths. Now, it took this organization close to 3 years to be successful in their aim, and they were successful. It was 3 years that was much needed, and the youths of Malaysia are benefiting from it. This illustration goes to show that bipartisan support and partnership between the Malaysian federal government and NGOs and CSOs can happen. Yes, it was a bumpy road, but it was a significant milestone. Ladies and gentlemen, the social problems are only going to get more drastic if it is not being dealt with head-on, using appropriate and sustainable policies like a relationship framework agreement, which brings together a federal government and CSOs and NGOs to advocate for a certain cause. The social problems are going to be here, and we need to deal with it. Lives are at stake here. Mental health illnesses is a good example of the federal government not dealing with it in the best of ways. Suicide is still a crime. Mental health NGOs and affiliations were flooded with calls amidst the pandemic, with Malaysians struggling from mental health illnesses. Our Ministry of Health, MOH, was too busy dealing with this invisible virus that has brought a lot of negative ramifications. Our medical healthcare personnel were burnt out, were tired, and this is how we can adopt, and this is where a relationship framework agreement comes in. CSOs and NGOs help provide manpower or resources to the government, and the government in turn help provide resources to advocate, to deal with the social problem of mental health illnesses. As Dr. Martin Luther King famously said in his I Have a Dream speech on the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, let us not wallow in the valley of despair, which is what we need to do, not wallow, but attack it head-on through a relationship framework agreement. The question then pertains, is this sustainable? To that I say yes, because we are leaving something as a mark for our beloved nation and the younger generation. Sustainability is what we are looking for, ladies and gentlemen, as the relationship framework agreement thus entail a policy journey, efficiency, effectiveness, responsiveness, and the delivery of public service. But the question then pertains, in practicality, has it been done before? Has it been successful? And can it work in Malaysia? Yes, ladies and gentlemen, a relationship framework agreement has been formally adopted, specifically by the New Zealand Clark Labour government, which reigned New Zealand from 1999 to 2008. The Clark Labour government realized that to address the imminent or the rising social pain points and issues, what had to be done was teamwork or a partnership together with the community, the voluntary sector, and most importantly, the people. So the Clark Labour government entered into a compact together with multiple legally registered CSOs and NGOs advocating for a certain cause. Now in this case, mental health illnesses. The Clark Labour government realized that they would put a test phase or a grace period to test out how successful the relationship framework agreement would be before it was formalized and adopted. Now this testing phase took exactly 10 years, a decade, until it was formalized, and it was called the Ki Tutahi Relationship Accord. Now in this grace period, the Clark Labour government wanted to test three things: the response, the effectiveness, and most importantly, the delivery of public service. How can the relationship framework agreement be of public service and help the community firsthand? And it was proven to be successful with the Ki Tutahi Relationship Accord, as it was formalized in 2011, and it still stands till today, 11 years later. What's amazing is that from the Ki Tutahi Relationship Accord, this relationship framework agreement was mirrored in other nations, both developed and developing nations like the UK and many other countries. Now in the Malaysian context, can this work? To that, I say yes. Now I'd like to refer to an initiative made by the Malaysian Ministry of Finance, MOF, towards the 2022 National Malaysian Budget, where in the preparation for the National Malaysian Budget, the Ministry of Finance decided that they'd like to have even more engagement sessions with various stakeholders in comprising of the Malaysian community. Businessmen, specific stakeholders, blue-collar workers, white-collar workers, university students, so on and so forth. Now, these engagements or discussions were proven to be fruitful as NGOs and CSOs gave their feedback on how they think the budget can better serve people. Ladies and gentlemen, I am proud to say that I was blessed to be a part of these engagement sessions that were held by the Ministry of Finance, where it was proven to be fruitful, and the criticism and the constructive feedback that were given was actually taken into account and put into the 2022 Malaysian National Budget, our highest gross budget thus far in Malaysian history. This goes to show that it can be done. Although it's only a minor engagement session, the framework and agreement, the relationship between the federal government and various NGOs or CSOs or even stakeholders can work in the Malaysian context. But for that to work, it takes two to tango. The community, people like you and me, have a part to play. How, you might ask? If you are passionate about a specific social problem or issue, and you feel like you are advocating or you want to get your boots on the ground, this is where you must get involved. How, you might ask? And some people or some Malaysians might think they're not at the right capacity. Well, to this I say, you're wrong. You are always at the right capacity to give back as a Malaysian, as a high school student, as a college student, as a corporate individual, as a fresh graduate, or even as an elderly citizen. We can and owe a duty to our beloved nation to give back. Our forefathers fought hard for independence and freedom, and we have them to thank for the very blanket of freedom that we sleep on every night. For that, we owe a duty to perform our civic duty, no matter how small, to give back. Get involved with any NGO or CSO that are advocating for social problems that you are passionate about. And never underestimate how small an impact you can bring, no matter your status as a high school student, as a university student, as a fresh grad, or even as an average Joe or ordinary civilian. As a high school student, participating in debates, you're exposing yourself to awareness of issues that are at hand. And they really play a big role and impact others around you. This is what we need, awareness and advocacy. Or even as a secondary school student, or even as a fresh grad or uni student, you can actually get involved with your local community voluntary organization or sector. Things like feeding the homeless, helping out wherever you can, helping the hospitals, community centers with engagement sessions through sports, music, so on and so forth. These little changes make a huge difference. And never underestimate, ladies and gentlemen, the impact you can bring to someone's life or through someone's life. We owe a duty to our beloved nation, as I've said. As the former US President John F. Kennedy once stated, ask not what your country can do for you, but ask instead what you can do for your country. Ladies and gentlemen, based on what I have said thus far, Malaysia desperately needs the federal government to merge together with NGOs and CSOs through a relationship framework agreement that highlights a policy journey and clearly states the role that both our federal government and NGOs, CSOs have to play to address the rising and imminent social pains and issues in Malaysia. Allow me to finish with a quote from the father of independence of Malaysia, the late Tunku Abdul Rahman. For we are all Malaysians. This is the bond that unites us. Let us always remember that unity is our fundamental strength as a people and as a nation. As Malaysians, let us continue to look out for one another, similar to the infamous hashtag amidst the pandemic, Kita Jaga Kita. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Roshan Nigel Miranda. I'm a policy advocate and speaker, and a small boy from PJ with big dreams who's trying to make a change in Malaysia through policy. Thank you for coming for my TED Talk.